Hello everybody, it's Donna. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're working on lesson number 4, which is a great place to start regardless of whether you purchased any kits or not. We're using the Celebrate with Cake stamp set as well as 2 different ink colors in Bermuda Bay as well as the new Rococo Rose. You will also need a stamp block. I'm using stamp block H, but you could also use stamp block D would work. You will also need a form of paper trimmer. Or you can use a pencil and a straight edge to mark your cardstock and cut it with a pair of scissors. I'm using the Fiskars paper trimmer. This one's quite expensive, but Stampin' Up! Does have their own that they've just come out with, but it's only available to demonstrators right now. So if you want to get one of those, which is fairly inexpensive, then you'd have to join my team and add it to your starter kit. I don't have one of the paper trimmers to show you, but it's a lot more economical than buying this Fiskars one. Now the Fiskars one is good. It can cut several sheets of paper, but when you're starting out, it's kind of a big investment. Okay, so I'm cutting it on my paper is 8.5 by 11. That's the standard size cardstock. I am using Whisper White. The first sheet I cut on the short side, so it's 8.5. So I cut it directly in half, which would be at 4.25. This one I'm cutting it on the long side, which is 11 inches, and I'm cutting it directly in half, which would be at 5.5. That gave me 4 sheets of paper out of the 2 sheets, which will also produce 4 cards. Now I'm going to score them. This step is optional. You do not need a scoreboard. I'm only using the scoreboard because I like it to be perfectly even, so I find that I can score it and get it folded perfectly even. Some cardstock, if you're using a cheaper brand, isn't necessarily square. And it sounds weird, but when you go to fold it, it won't be folded right even. For me, scoring it first in half, so this one is 8.5. So if I score it at 4.25, I can fold it along that score mark, and I use the scoreboard to help me line it up. So this one I'm actually going to flip over, and the reason I'm flipping over is some people believe that you should flip it over and fold it the other way so that it causes as less stress as possible on the paper. I don't see how that makes a difference, but I'm going to show you what they both look like in a second. So I use the scoreboard to push the paper right against the edge so that it's as even as I can possibly get it, because having a card that has where one side's a little bit off, I just don't find that very appealing. So I'm pushing against the edge there and then just making sure I'm folding it there. And then now those are the 11-inch ones. So the 11-inch ones, of course, I'm going to do it 5.5 because I need to cut it or score it directly in half. And again, I flipped it over, pushing it right against the edge there, and then move my fingers back to crease it. This one 5.5 again, but this one I'm not going to flip over. I'm just going to push it against the edge there, and then move my fingers back to crease the edge. As I said, you do not need the scoreboard right at this point. I find it a necessity eventually, but you don't need one at this point. Now I'm looking at the creases, and this is where I don't see that there's much difference. I'm using a bone folder. Again, you don't need a bone folder right now, but a bone folder is very useful too, and I use it every day. You could use, like I say, a credit card or something that's not going to damage your edge. And I'm trying to show anyways that I just don't see the big deal in which way you fold it. But to each his own, whichever way you prefer. Whatever makes you happy. I don't believe that there's any rules. Or I don't feel that there are any rules. Do whatever makes you happy, whatever looks good, and that's perfect. Okay, so those are the 2 sheets. Out of those 4 cuts, or those 2 cuts, of the 4 sheets of paper, I can do 4 different layouts. 2 top folding, 2 side folding, 2 landscape, 2 portrait. I'm going to use the portrait one, side folding portrait card. That is normally the one when I think about designing cards, until I think about something that might not fit on it. That's usually the one I go to, and everybody has their own little style. I think that's one of mine. I just prefer cards that look that way. Now I'm using, to do my stamping, I'm putting my card base on top of it's actually a mouse pad. We do sell mats that you can do the same thing. It's that photopolymer does not have the included spongy part that the red rubber stamps or the cling stamps do. So by having that little spongy part, it helps any of the bigger stamps stamp nicer. Now with this stamp here, the flower is not going to make that much difference to have it, but since I did find for the banner that it did help a lot to have it. Now you only need the one block, either a D or an H, I believe it is, block, but I have many blocks, so I just put them all my stamps on different ones. The banner one that I'm going to do at the bottom is the one that I really found could use the cushion underneath to get it to stamp nicer. Just stamping the sentiment right underneath the flowers because I want to put the banner sentiment right underneath that. I'm not using anything to line it up. I'm just eyeballing it. In some instances, if I'm not using the mouse pad, I will put it right onto my work surface, either grid paper or on my glass mat, and just line it up, eyeballing it that way. Just tapping it onto the ink pad and then walking my fingers across the stamp. I don't normally rock the stamp because I'm afraid that any ink's going to get on, that might be on the block, might get onto my card. Okay, so that's the outside of the card. I did decide that I prefer to do something on the inside, so I'm going to do stamp the flower again on the inside in the bottom right hand corner, but I'm going to stamp off once because I didn't want it to be as bright. I kind of wanted it to be subtle. I'm just trying to find some scrap paper to do that with. Okay, so that's the first stamp, and that's the second generation stamping. And see how much lighter it is? It's still solid, it's just lighter, so that's what I want for the flower on the inside. So I stamped it off once, and then I'm going to stamp it right there in the bottom right hand corner. Now for the stem, I'm going to do the same thing, only the stem is going to go off the card. I just don't want to get ink on my mouse pad, so I'm just going to stamp it, move the little scrap piece underneath, so that the ink will go on that and not on my mouse pad. And there we go, it's nice and light. So there is our finished card, which is again just stamp, paper, and ink. Nothing fancy. This is a Tombow Mono Sand Eraser. I find this to be really very useful. Don't need it right off the bat, but if you do happen to get a little smudge, it helps greatly with removing that smudge from your card. Okay, so again, those are what you needed to complete this card. Nothing major. Stamps, paper, and ink. My Sweet and Simple class resumes. Great for beginners or those experienced. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you enjoyed this video, and we will catch you next time.